This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me, and I'm desperate for you, and I'm lost without you. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your very presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me, and I'm desperate for you, and I'm lost without you, and I'm desperate for you, and I'm lost without you. I'm lost without you.
Well, good evening. Hope everybody is enjoying their time here this evening. We want to welcome everybody here and also online. So let's go ahead and open it up the way we always do. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, I'm excited about tonight, and it's been a little chaotic. You like the way I did that, didn't you? And so I asked Jeremy to teach tonight. He's got some stuff that he really wants to bring in light, and I think it's right on time. So we're going to listen to him tonight, talk about how God's grace is still in the chaos, man. Just because you're in the chaos, maybe God is repositioning you. Maybe it's a situation where it's really not as bad as it looks. Anyway, with that, come on up.
Well, good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, everybody. Just want to start out to tell you today I got to go down to Newton County and see my son on National Signing Day. This is his college football team that he's playing for. Now, on top of that, I got to be with my ex-wife, my ex-mother-in-law, my ex-father-in-law, my ex-brother-in-law. There's a whole lot of exes here, okay? I got to be with my other kids. I got to sit down with them, and we got to get up on stage, and I got to see God's grace work for me in a way that, man, I never saw before. How we all was cordial and we all came together. Then went and had lunch with them. Imagine that. Sat with my ex-wife, breaking bread with her. Here's my ex-father and my ex-brother-in-law, my ex-sister-in-law, all of them, and I got to see God's grace right at hand, right there. You know, got to celebrate my son. 18 years old, going to play college football, living his dream, Andrew College. Fighting Tigers, the greatest college football team ever. This is their season number 2, but I'm going with that. Alabama ain't got nothing on them, but that's just that. So I come to that to open it up with this. The reason I came into recovery was because of my ex-wife. She divorced me, and that started a process. You know, it was our life was chaotic. I was a chaos. I was a tornado that was in the trailer park. That was me. Our whole life was chaotic. She got rid of me, which rightfully so she should. She saved my life, believe it or not. There's grace in that. You know, but what I want to talk about is during that process, there was a cop that showed me more grace than anybody. And I didn't know it was grace at the time. I got arrested at my mother's house. Well, I'll start back with that evening, or that morning. I went to my uncle, and we was having a conversation. I had like $11 in my pocket. Okay? Had $11 in my pocket, and the only thing in my mind was, man, when I leave here, my uncle's house, I'm going to the liquor store. Get me a half gallon, because Tonka was only $8.99 for a half gallon. And if anybody knows Tonka, you know that is about as low as Mr. Boston. Okay? It's horrible, but I had the value shop. Okay? We go from glass to plastic, right? So I had the value shop. So I went back to the house, to my mother's house, because I was living there. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to tell her what I think about her. And at the same time, I had a meth pipe in my pocket. So I was high on meth and drinking liquor. And so I got to tell her what I thought about her. And during that process, she went to swing on me. And I grabbed her arm and I slammed her up against the wall. And then she swung again. I grabbed her arm and I said, you're never going to hit me again. We got into it. I put my mom, who was probably about at that time 90 pounds, up against the wall. I was abusive to her at that time. Now, did I tell her what I thought about her? I sure did. Was that wrong? It sure was. I didn't honor her in no way, shape, form, or fashion. Went back inside. The neighbors heard the fighting going on. They called the cops. Went back inside. And the two men that was living there, we got into it. Then my mother turned to me, came at me as I turned to her, knocked her down right as the officer was coming into the living room. God's grace. If he wouldn't have removed me from that situation, it could have got real violent. Instead, the officer showed up at the right time, at the right moment, walked in, saw what happened, and took me outside and escorted me outside. Now, here's the beautiful thing. They reached in my pocket, they found a meth pipe. I'm going to jail. I'm in the back of the cop car, and I asked the cop, I said, what are you arresting me for? He said, well, simple battery under the Georgia Domestic Violence Act. And he goes, but Mr. Kitchens, that thing that I found in your pocket, I'm not going to charge you for it, but you need help. Well, I sat in jail that day. Well, for about 3 days, I think I was in jail. I realized that I needed help. Got out of jail, I started researching Alcoholics Anonymous, rehabs. That was the first person that I heard I had a problem. My ex-wife used to tell me I had a problem the whole time, but I could never grasp that. She told me I had a drinking problem. And I would always tell her she's the one with a drinking problem. She's like, I don't have a drinking problem. I said, yeah, you do. You got a problem with me drinking. I don't have a problem with me drinking. All right? It's that simple. But you know what? That was my problem. You know, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous for the consequences to stop. I didn't realize that I was going to stay. By me staying, it was going to fix what was wrong with me, and that was a spiritual formality that I had. So, I want to talk about today a story in the Bible. Talk about grace in the chaos. Sodom and Gomorrah. That story, when I was sitting there reading over it, I'm like, man, that story there's a whole lot of grace into it. So here Lot is. He's sitting at the entrance when two angels came walking up. And in that time they had a conversation, and Lot invited them over to the house, have a feast, and wash their feet and everything else. So the angels come to the house. And then later that night, all the men of Sodom showed up at his house, young and old, all right, showed up at his house and shouted for Lot to come outside. All right? To come outside with the men. He said, the men said, we know that there are two men here, and we want you to bring them outside so we can have sex with them. Now imagine that. That's chaotic. The guys are coming to your house, the angels are inside, and that's what these guys want to do is come and take them outside and have sex with them. So Lot then stepped out of his house and offered his two virgin daughters to him to do whatever they wanted to and leave the men alone, all right, because they were under his protection. And when I look at this, I think to myself, I'm like, Jerry Springer don't have nothing on the Bible. Jerry Springer is Sesame Street compared to what the Bible has. If anybody hasn't heard these stories, I'd beg you to read them. It's racy. Go to Song of Psalms and you'll see what he talks about the Shunammite woman and everything. It's pretty racy. So anyway, the men are standing outside. They grab Lot. They want to break down his door as the angels grab Lot and they pull him back in the house, and then the angels blinded the men outside. So then the mob left. All right, all of them were blind. They left, and the angels go back inside and tell Lot. He tells Lot, he says, "Tell all your relatives to leave, because we were commanded by the Lord to come here and burn and destroy the city." So Lot goes and tells his fiancée, goes and tells his daughter's fiancés. They laugh at him, think he's crazy. So the next morning they get up, nobody's there. All the relatives, nobody's there. It's just Lot, his wife, and his daughters. And so the angels sit there and tell him, "Listen, you need to leave, and you need to leave in a hurry." All right, so let's bring up Genesis 19:16. It said, when Lot still hesitated, the angels seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and rushed them to safety outside the city, for the Lord was merciful. God's grace. For the Lord was merciful. When I read this, the thing that's got me, though, is it says seized. It didn't say he grabbed their hands. Seized their hands. Anybody in here ever been in a drug seize? Where the cops have come into the house? What happens? They take possession, don't they? They take it captive. The angels took Lot and his daughters and his wife by the hand and took them captive. Is what they did. Just like in a drug seize, they seize everything. The dog, the guns, the money, the drugs, everything when they come in, the house, it's all theirs. And why is it theirs? Because they have a piece of paper that says search warrant, signed off by a judge. Okay? That's why. The authority of the Lord right there, and how merciful he was to get them out of the city. Now, why was Lot important to get out of the city? Well, we can go back to Abraham. Abraham and God had a conversation about the city. And Abraham talked God from 50 righteous people. God said, if there's 50 righteous people in the city, I will not burn it down. He talked him all the way down to 10. All right? And Abraham wanted Lot, who was his nephew, to be out of the city. All right? Talk about a friend of God. Abraham had these conversations with him, and God's like, okay, I will grant that. That's the importance of Lot being out of the city. So then the angels told him to run to the mountains, not the valley, or you will be swept away. They was going to burn every little village around there up, around the whole city. And then Lot looked at the angels, and Lot said this. He goes, I can't go to the mountains. If I do, I sure will die. Lot wasn't a good person, okay? But God's grace was moving him out of harm's way, all right? God's grace was moving him out of the way. Lot was not a good man. He probably had some bad dealings with people up in the mountains. Probably owed them money, but he knew he would sure die. Anybody in here owed the drug dealer money? Anybody? Right? Probably owed him some money. Probably had some dirty deeds. Instead, he asked the angels, he said, can I go to this city in the valley? They was going to destroy the valley. And the angels granted that and said, yes. Go to that city, but hurry. But hurry. Let's go to Genesis 19, 23 through 26. Lot reached the valley just as the sun was rising over the horizon. I want you to understand, all this took place overnight. This is how chaotic this was. It wasn't like a whole day or anything like that. This all happened from night till dawn. Next. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. Next. He utterly destroyed them along with all the other cities and villages of the plain, wiping out all the people and every bit of vegetation. Everything was utterly destroyed. All the people, children, the cries, the screams. It had to be chaos. That had to be chaotic to know that your people, that these people they left from, they're gone. And they're suffering. Had to be. I couldn't imagine. Next. But Lot's wife looked back as she followed behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Now, I want to talk about her for a minute. You know, Jesus in Luke 17:32 mentions to his disciples, remember what happened to Lot's wife. Remember what happens to Lot's wife. Why is that so important? Think about this. We don't know her name. We just know her as Lot's wife. That's all we know about her. But I do know this, and I'm going to bring it to the day's times, not times back then. She went to preschool there in this town. Her family was there. She grew up there. First boyfriend was there. Okay? She went to prom there. She was probably on the homecoming committee, maybe a cheerleader. She has all these memories. She birthed 2 children there. She has all these memories of this place, and yet she was at safety in the village where she was supposed to be at the time. And I can only imagine, I'm not going to judge a woman for what she did. The angels commanded them not to turn around and keep moving forward, not to look back. That's what the angels commanded them. And I can't blame her for looking back because she's got all these memories. Her past was there. Through all the chaos, she's hearing everything going on. The chaos, the fire coming down, the screams. People are burning. Her family's burning. And what does she do? I believe she did this with tears in her eyes. She turned around, and then she was frozen in her past. She couldn't let go of her past. Well, she couldn't see that God was moving her to her future. He was taking her from all that chaos and moving her out to her future that he had for her. Instead, he stayed stuck. How many of you are stuck in your past? How many of you remember your past like it was yesterday instead of just keeping it cracked? The big book tells me we're not to regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it because our experience can help others. But how many of you live in your past? How many have got stuck in their past and went back out? Went back to the trap house. Went back to the liquor store. Went back to that old relationship where he used to beat the crap out of you. Because you're used to that. You're not used to what God has for you. So you're comfortable being in your past. Sometimes being uncomfortable is the best place for you. Right there, they were uncomfortable. Unfortunately, Lot's wife wasn't. She was so uncomfortable, she turned to her past. And there she turned into a pillar of salt. And she stayed frozen in her past. Let's go to Hebrews. Brings me to Abram. Let's go to Hebrews 11:15. Abram and Sarah was told by God. Well, Abram was told by God just before he was Abraham. He was told by God at the time. He said, God told him to go. Leave where you're at. I got a plan that I promise you. That I'm promising you. Go. God didn't tell him. Abraham left cattle, left his home, left his family, left everything behind. Didn't know where he was going, what he was going to face, or anything. Just got up and left. Okay? And the Hebrew talks about it. This is what it says. If they had longed for the country they came from, they could have gone back. Abraham did not one time think about that old country. He did not think about them old haunts. He did not think about what he was leaving. He was walking to his promise that God had for him. Unfortunately, Lot's wife, she chose to think about the old country. She chose to stay stuck in her past and stay frozen. She wasn't living in the present. She was living in her past. Don't do that. Don't do that. Y'all can come on up. Guys, there's a story that Jesus talks about, and it's the prodigal son. And it's one of the stories that I love to sit there and read because, man, I was that prodigal son. That's who I was. I was that son that took the inheritance, that left his father, turned my back upon God. When I was 15 years old, I cussed God out and told him where he could go. I did. After my father died, after some tragedy in my life, and I stayed stuck in that for many, many years. You know, and the story talks about the son came to the father, and he told the father, he said, hey, can I get my inheritance now while you're alive? And the father granted him that, said, yeah, you can. And a few days later, he left for another country. And he spent and blew all of his inheritance on wild nights. Anybody in here had wild, long nights? Anybody? Yeah, I'm sure. Long relationships that shouldn't last, that should be cut off, that never should have happened. Yeah, I'm sure. You know, so he got broke. He got hungry. Okay, he lost everything. He was starving. He was working for a man, wasn't even getting paid. He was feeding pigs. Is what he was doing. And he got to the point where he was starving so much he was in the pig slop. This man right here all of a sudden had a thought, said, well, you know what? My father's servants, they even get paid. So why don't I go back to my father and just be a servant of his? And this is where the story really gets good. This is where it really gets good. It says in there, the father sees him from a long distance. It didn't say he saw him from here to the door. He said from a long distance away. His son's coming back home to him, who's beaten, broken down, who's shameful, probably hanging his head, probably like some of us have. So I know I have. Okay, I know I have. And so he's sitting there, and what does the father do? He runs to him. Runs to embrace his son because he's come home. He forgave him for what he did. He forgave him for leaving. He forgave him for everything that he absolutely did, and ran to him, embraced him, told the servants to get him clothes and prepare a feast, have a celebration for him because he's come back home. Man. I think of that also, thinking James, I think it's James 4:8, if I'm not mistaken, where it says, if you draw closer to me, I'll draw closer to you. Draw nearer to me, I'll draw nearer to you. Who's the first person that has to take that action step? We are. But there's something about us taking that first step to God, because he doesn't say how far we got to draw, where he runs to us with his arms wide open, welcoming him back to the kingdom. You know, in the chaos of my life, there was always grace. I had a stroke March the 29th of 2021, and that changed everything for me. And I got to feel the presence of God one day that I never felt before in my life. I got to feel the warmness that ran over my body, and I knew who that was from. That was from Papa. And I sat there and I cried, and I said, Papa, you're right here beside me. You're right here beside me, taking care of me right now. Or you're playing at Augusta National. Look, I love golf, people, okay? I will bring that up at all times. You're playing at Augusta National, and you let me know we're going to play there one day, either here on earth or in heaven. And I'm okay with either one. Guys, if anybody needs to come back home to the Father, I normally don't do this. There's two pastors over here that will gladly introduce you to Jesus. That will gladly tell you about Papa and how he takes care of you. Anybody. Guys, thank y'all for listening. That's all I got.
All my words fall short. I got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? I could sing these songs as I often do, but every song must end, and you never do. So I throw up my hands, praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. I know it's not much, nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I've got one response. I've got just one move. With my arms stretched wide, I will worship you. So I throw up my hand, praise you again and again. 'Cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. I know not much, but I have nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. Come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song. You got a lion inside of those lungs. Get up and praise the Lord. Come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song. You got a lion inside of those lungs. Get up and praise the Lord. Come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song. You got a lion inside of those lungs. Get up and praise the Lord. So I throw up my hand, praise you again and again. All that I have, hallelujah, hallelujah. No, it's not much, I'm nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah.
Jeff,
Yes,
question.
yes.
If you're in the middle of chaos, who do you reach out to?
Our Father,
Who art
who art
in
in
heaven.
heaven,
Hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come,
thy will be done
on earth as it is in heaven.
Give
Give us this day
our
daily bread,
and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Lead us
Lead us
not
not
into
into
temptation,
temptation.
deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.